Welcome to Let's Talk Agri-Tech, the podcast from the UK Agri-Tech Centre. I'm Sophia Herscher, and in this episode, we're diving into the future of livestock farming through the lens of epigenomics and precision agriculture. I'm joined by Dr Andrew Lessey, the COO of Antler Bio, a fast-growing agri-tech startup that's transforming how we understand and manage dairy herds. With a background in veterinary science and genetics, to co-developing a decision support platform that's already showing really amazing, impressive results on farm, Andrew shares the story behind Epiherd, a tool that uses gene expression data to help farmers boost productivity, sustainability, and animal welfare. We talk about the company's pivot from horse genomics to dairy, the challenges of scaling up, and what it really takes to drive tech adoption in agriculture. So let's get into it. Welcome, Andrew. It's really nice to have you on the podcast. I'd love to start with your background and how you got into bioveterinary science and agri-tech.
Thanks, Sophia, and thank you very much for having me. My background is I have a BSc in bioveterinary science and a PhD in genetics and molecular biology from the Royal Veterinary College. From there, I took up sort of more commercially focused positions in sort of life science and biotech firms. And then it was during COVID, really, that I had the opportunity to sort of pivot back to something that was a little bit closer to my sort of educational origins, animal science world. That's where I got involved with meeting two co-founders, Maria Jensen and Natalie Conte, and essentially involved in AntlerBio and sort of epigenomics, which is what we're doing now. I was initially attracted to it because I have a passion for horse racing, as sort of roots, as it were in the equine performance sphere, and essentially looking at how very sort of genetically similar racehorses produced such different performance on the track.
So AntlerBio started in horse genomics. That's really niche. How did you get into that? What's the origin story between you and the co-founders?
Antler started as an equine genomics business in Scandinavia. And our co-founders were basically working quite closely with a sort of horse race breeder of standard bred performance horses out there, which basically approached them to help understand why genetically similar progeny of some of their sort of star performers had such differing performance when they reached a racetrack. And obviously that was because sort of genetics are not the only factor important for performance. Although it sets their potential, it was obviously sort of diet, nutrition, habitat, so on and so forth that had big impact. And that's essentially what our co-founders set out to achieve. And so began looking more at sort of gene expression, environmental interactions and epigenomics as to what the influences there were that was having such a sort of detrimental performance on some of those animals in terms of their performance. And then during COVID, towards the end of 2020, early 2021, is when I got involved with Maria and Natalie and sort of plans essentially to translate the technology from sort of the equine performance sphere, which is obviously quite a niche, small market, into something that had a lot more potential, an opportunity for social good, which was into production animals and starting specifically with livestock and dairy cattle.
What inspired that pivot from horse genomics to dairy farming?
Great question. So I think it was more about when we were looking at equine performance, it was very much around how can you get the animals to perform at their optimum. In their instance, it was athletic performance on a racetrack. Livestock is no different. We treat those animals as very efficient athletes as well, but with a completely different sort of performance measurement. In the case of dairy cattle, that would be milk production, resilience, fertility. In the case of beef cattle, for example, that would be sort of daily light weight gain, nutritional quality, taste and flavour profiles of essentially the milk and meat produced. So it was very much about how we can use that technology to improve desirable traits and characteristics within those animals. And then obviously within sort of the agricultural sphere, there are some known challenges around productivity, economic viability, and obviously a shifting focus towards environmental sustainability as well, that we thought the technology could have a big impact in basically sort of assisting farmers and agricultural supply chains in addressing.
Do you have a background in dairy farming, have knowledge of that sector before you were inspired to take this technology and translate it over?
No, not at all. Being completely honest, my first foray into sort of the world of farming and agriculture was very much with Antler Bio. I'd obviously had some exposure, thankfully going to a veterinary focused university, but no, I'd never particularly been into agriculture and farming before becoming involved with Antler. nor had our co-founders either, all of us coming very much from sort of the life science and biotechnology world. And so this was a big step for us. And this is where the UK Agri-Tech Centre was essential in helping guide us through the ecosystem, understanding the challenges, especially around new technologies and technology adoption into different agricultural spheres that we weren't aware of before. And it's been a fantastic, but also fascinating challenge in breaching some of those known areas where it's difficult to sort of make inroads with new technologies.
I love that you shifted towards solving real world problems for farmers. I think it's a really impactful way to work. I'd love to get a little bit more about your growth story. So you've taken this idea to where you are now. It's really amazing to see. Could you just take us along that timeline? How have you gone from idea all the way to where you are now?
Of course. So our two co-founders, Maria and Natalie, raised a pre-seed financing round towards the end of 2020. Myself and our head of R&D, Ian Garner, were then the sort of first hires in sort of the second half of 2021. We were then sort of fortunate working with the UK Agri-Tech Centre and some good collaborators and colleagues to basically be able to secure an Innovate UK Smart Grant back then to basically help us translate the technology from equine into bovine and dairy cows. That turned out to be absolutely pivotal because it was just around the time when the investment landscape for agri-tech was beginning to close down. The early parts of COVID began to bite. And that basically gave us an 18-month window in which we could bring in the core technical competencies we need to help us translate this technology and start thinking about what user interface and user experience we'd need to deliver a complex technology onto farms, which is obviously a fairly dirty and sort of a varied environment. That thankfully gave us some really good outcomes and some results. We were able to leverage that to raise a further funding round, which would have been in March 2023. That helped us finance further expansion and continued development of the technology and the recruitment of some early adopters to begin to gather some impact data. At the same time, we were also able to secure Innovate UK Better Food for All research grants looking at improving milk nutritional quality. And then shortly after that, we were also lucky in securing a Farming Innovation Programme small R&D research grant to translate the technology in further into developing dairy calves and heifers, which was really useful. All in all, that basically has allowed us to scale from a team of 3 full-time employees towards the end of 2024 up to a team of 12 full-time employees, as well as nearly the same amount part-time. We've been able to raise a seed round now, which was the equivalent of about £3.25 million. The company, thankfully, is on a very good trajectory and in a really strong position to be able to sort of continue to grow and deliver our technology into the marketplace.
Amazing scale-up journey is really wonderful to hear and quite quick when you think about your timeline. It's quite rapid.
We've been very lucky, as well as putting some skill and effort into it, but luck always does play a part in these things. We've been very well supported by institutions such as the UK Agri-Tech Centre, as well as a lot of other people in our network that really help us excel and deliver this to farm. I think what we need to focus on next is obviously demonstrating the impact of this within UK dairy farms. The majority of the early adopters that we've worked with to date have been in Finland and Scandinavia because of the origins of the company and one of our founders, Maria. But now we're really looking to sort of bring the advantage of this to UK dairy farmers and beyond. That's our key focus for the next 6 to 12 months.
I'd like to rewind a little bit because during your description of your journey, you mentioned your Innovate UK grant, the Farming Innovation Programme grant that you have. So I'd like to talk about Epiherd, which is the commercialized technology, proprietary technology.
Mm-hmm.
What is it and how does it help farmers?
Certainly. Epiherd is our state-of-the-art decision support platform for dairy farmers. Epiherd is designed around a blood test and sort of data amalgamation from other systems sort of on farm where we capture performance and health records. And we combine that all together to give dairy farmers unique insights and tailored, precise, data-driven recommendations as to how they can improve the performance, efficiency, and sustainability of their dairy herds. The unique aspect of Epiherd is the fact that we capture this blood test and look at the gene expression of these animals. which gives us biologically validated insights into these animals and is therefore sort of the unique element that allows us to give us sort of these tailored recommendations to farmers that have really impressive sort of impact in terms of sort of increasing milk yield by up to 22%, increasing milk constituents by up to sort of 6-7%. And overall, thus far, Epiherd early adopters are all achieving an average sort of return on investment of over 7-1.
Those are some amazing statistics. It sounds like fantastic impact on farmers. So say if I'm a dairy farmer and I open the app, and you talked a little bit before about a user interface and how you're working on that. What does it look like in real time for me? What recommendations are there, and how do you take that really amazing genetic information, that performance information, and make it actionable?
Really good question. So I think one of the things we learned very early on in our journey is sort of data is not information, and data is not always helpful. There's a lot of data available on farm, but not a lot of it can always be really useful to the farmer. And some of it obviously quite complex and sort of really ugly in which to look at. What we wanted to do was develop a user interface that was logical, intuitive, and simple, essentially, to be able to understand what the key messages from this sort of complex biological data we were basically analysing. To do that, we've worked very hard with farmers and adopting sort of open innovation practices to have a sort of farmer-led design on the platform that basically gives them a quick overview of the performance of their herd based on sort of gene expression and epigenomics, and then also to focus primarily on tailored precision recommendations for them. These recommendations can be related to diet and nutrition. They could be related to infrastructure and cleanliness. They could be related to sort of stress, inflammation, and animal health. It's a very broad, holistic range of angles that we can basically cover because of the power of the data. But ultimately, what we try and do is give very, very simple and almost generic recommendations so that farmers can act upon the data that we give them and implement the recommendations how is best for their system. Obviously, how you would approach some of these topics and some of these management recommendations based on if you're a sort of organic regenerative herd compared to if you're an indoor intensive dairy herd would obviously be significantly different. So the idea is the technology is agnostic based on sort of dairy system, and it's designed to basically help everyone and obviously be sort of useful amongst just dairy farmers and their support network. So be able to sort of be of benefit to their vet and their nutritionist and consultant at the same time.
Really excited to hear that this technology has been implemented at our Southwest Dairy Development Centre, and they're just getting to the point where they can really change their management based on that. You use a lot of terms like gene expression and epigenomics and all these non-static genetic terms. In really simple language, I'd like to understand how gene expression, for example, reflects how animals respond to their environment.
Certainly. I'll try and do this in the easiest way that I know how. If we consider genetics, which are obviously widely used within sort of breeding programs and selective breeding strategies in dairy farms, are what kind of set dairy cows' potential. It breeds in their sort of capabilities if they were to perform at their absolute optimum. Sort of gene expression, epigenomics is kind of looking at how active and how sort of informed the expression of those genetics is. And that's affected by all external environmental factors that have an impact on that animal. So from their diet, from the sort of climate and temperature, to their habitat, housing, obviously the management strategies that go on a farm and the environment around them. So essentially what we're trying to do is understand how those environmental influences essentially are influencing the genetic potential of those animals. So are they able to reach their genetic potential, or are they being held back because of something in their environment, whether that's sort of a dietary insufficiency, whether that's potentially sort of hygiene or environmental stressor that's causing them to sort of have an inflammatory response. Basically trying to take a very holistic view and understand what these animals are essentially trying to tell us about their sort of current state of their health and well-being based on their own gene activity. But to distill that down into really simple terms, it's essentially asking the animal what it needs to perform at its optimum.
You mentioned earlier that you're increasing milk yield, better quality, improved welfare, and you've had some great farmer feedback. Could you give us a real example, like a success story that you've had on a farm so far?
Certainly. So, a very advanced indoor robotic herd in Finland. We've been working with them for around 18 months now. They were coming from a very, very sort of high benchmark in that the herd was doing a lot right. The animals were in very good condition. They had a lot of data capturing systems on that farm already. When we sort of agreed to basically work with them closely as an early adopter, I think there was maybe a few concerns sort of in our minds that actually they're coming from a really high baseline. Would we be able to generate a significant improvement in performance for those animals that were already of the sort of upper echelons of dairy farm management and very progressive data focused farmers? We agreed to do it and needed to demonstrate the proof of technology and the benefit to all farmers and farming systems. What we found was that we were able to achieve similar increases in performance from them in terms of a percentage. Their increase in milk yield after 6 months post implementing Epiherd recommendations was about 6.8%. That as a short-term metric was a fantastic proxy to demonstrate the performance of the technology. And then that translates into a significant sort of gain in profitability for them and economic, return on investment for the farm, which allows them to invest further into their animals and other technologies as well. So it's a bit of a self-perpetuating cascade that they're able to sort of generate. I always focus on that one as a sort of nice case study because I think it shows that in all sort of dairy operations, there's opportunities to basically, push the animals a little bit further just by sort of trying to focus on what it is that these animals need from a biological perspective and trying to take a very tailored and precise approach to animal management. Looking at some of the farms that we've sort of looking at doing adopt funding scheme applications with and sort of trying to be a testbed and Epiherd demonstrator in the UK, we'd be able to see very similar, if not more exciting results than that. So I'm really sort of enthused and inspired by the results that are going to come out from UK farms over the next 3 to 6 months.
You mentioned the Adopt Fund and this whole idea of trialing and testing and proof of concept. There's this big thing in agri-tech where we have a lot of questions around adoption of technology. How do we package this up so it can be adopted more widely to improve welfare, to improve yields? What do you think are the big challenges, not just for your technology, but maybe touching on wider in the industry when it comes to adoption of tech?
I think personally there needs to be a bilateral contract between the tech provider and the farmer. I think that understanding that, agriculture is a very heterogeneous environment in that it's very different and it is difficult to create a one solution fits all. It requires honesty and tech providers to be upfront about the fact that a lot of these technologies, they're not finalized, they're not finished, they're in development. I think we've tried to be open and upfront about that with Epiherd. It obviously has some fantastic impact and we're really excited and enthused about the fact that that's only going to get better as the technology continues to improve. But we also understand there are elements we need to work on and improve further so that the optimum usability exists between farmer and the technology, that basically people are actually able to receive the sort of benefits and impact from what we're trying to do. And of course, we're quite unique in that we're a passive technology. Insightful data and information and are obviously providing these tailored recommendations to farm, but they're of only of benefit to the farmer if they implement those recommendations. We have to put a lot of work into understanding the sort of cost risk profile that a farmer has to undergo in order to basically see that advantage. It's an investment for them and obviously has impacts on sort of, cash flows, annual budgets. So I think it's very much a sort of a contract that needs to be in place between sort of farm and tech provider that, both of them will support the ongoing continued development of technology, especially a new high-tech innovative technology such as ours. There's opportunities there for farmers to feed back into the development of technology. It should be a mutual beneficial relationship that's not just a sale, but essentially a relationship building exercise.
Yeah, so you have a veterinary background, and I often hear this idea about precision medicine when it comes to human health, and it sometimes feels to me that we are moving towards that when it comes to farming, livestock farming in particular. What do you think would be the challenges in integrating this type of precision health information into a farming system?
It's an interesting question. The way I kind of envisage that is that I think taking very much more of a precision element is where we can really unlock some sort of gains in productivity and sustainability on farms that are going to be really important over the next decade. And I think it's fairly agreed that's the way that we need to travel. But it's understanding that individual animal health plans and feeding plans are something your average commercial dairy operation at the moment is not going to be invested in and not something they're able to deliver. So it's about, again, providing insights and recommendation on our part that are, as I say, very much easy to implement and therefore has a low bar to generating significant impact. And I think that comes back to the point I was trying to make previously, that we hone, optimize those recommendations that we're giving to farmers by working closely with them, with vets, with their support networks to understand what's achievable and what has the most impact.
I really like that your technology is grounded in what the farmers want and need, more importantly. And these discussions with farmers, I think that's super important for technology development in my mind.
Thank you. We agree. We're not perfect at it. I'm not saying that we haven't got areas that we can improve on. We certainly can. But I think we understand that there's no point sort of trying to devise a technology that people either don't want or find too complicated or isn't addressing the challenges they need us to. Our initial focus with Epiherd has been around demonstrating improvement in productivity and a significant return on investment for farmers, because we hope that is ultimately going to help drive adoption. And by driving that adoption, then the additional secondary benefits of the technology towards significantly improved animal health and welfare, towards improvement in fertility, longevity, resilience, will all play out over time, that will continue to add value to those farms and help with some of the challenges within the dairy supply chain.
Yeah, it sounds like you're off to a flying start. In the beginning of the episode, we talk a lot about AntlerBio's growth. So I think as we approach the end, I'd like to ask you, what are the couple of top challenges do you think you have faced in developing this technology and growing the company?
Good question. I think first and foremost is one of them is credibility. From a technical scientific perspective, we're very credible, but we don't have a team that is absolutely steeped in agricultural background. So we're dependent on working closely with people who are experts, farmers who, can help sort of relay their challenges well to us. There's very much been almost like a translational element that's been a steep learning curve, but we've had good support to help get past that. I think educational components. So obviously I've thrown around sort of a few terms that I think a few people might sort of be like, what's he talking about in terms of gene expression, epigenomics? Obviously requires us to kind of tell the story a little bit. Lots of people have probably heard of genetics, but obviously there's a significant difference in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of environmental optimization, as opposed to sort of probably the more commonly known selection and breeding optimization that genetics is known for. So that's been a challenge for us and a continued challenge to try and explain the differences between what we're doing, I think, as a very innovative and novel technology. The third thing is, like all technologies at the moment, we are still trying to drive adoption of the technology. As I mentioned, a huge focus for us now is basically sort of commercialization and bringing this technology to farms. We by no means have got that puzzle solved at all. And so that's a real big area of focus for us. I hope I'll be able to come back here in a few years' time and say, we did this and that to solve that. But we have to continually focus on where we want to go and how we supply a solution that farmers enjoy and want to use and get benefit from. So I think that is ultimately still the biggest challenge and something that will remain for a significant period of time yet.
It's been really great to hear about AntlerBio's business growth and the Epiherd technology. If anyone wanted to find out a little bit more, where would be best?
certainly the best place would be to go to our website, which is www.antlerbio.com, or to find us on social media sites, whether that's LinkedIn, AntlerBio, whether that's on sort of X, AntlerBio. There are other methods to contact us. Or if anybody wanted to reach out to us directly, we do have our sort of, general email address, which is info@antlerbio.com, that people are more than welcome to reach out about. As I say, we're still very much a developing agri-tech startup. We're always interested in the sort of collaboration and partnership opportunities. And especially if you're a dairy farmer, potentially excited about the financial returns that Epiherd might achieve for you, then obviously please do get in touch.
Thank you for your time today, Andrew. It's been really wonderful talking to you.
Thanks, Sophia.
I'd like to thank Andrew for joining us today on the podcast for what was a really interesting conversation. Head over to the UK Agri-Tech Centre website for any more information. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.